Welcome back, everybody. This is Phil Ferguson, and you're watching another episode of the Phil Ferguson Show. And just in case you're listening to the podcast, yes, there is a video version of this interview on the YouTube's thingy. And with me today is Sarah Ray. She is the president of the Humanist Society. How are you today, Sarah?
I'm well, Phil. Thanks for having me. Long time listener, first time caller, I think.
Very, very nice. I mean, we've known each other for years at conventions
Yeah.
and fun stuff. And hopefully your life is well, it's settled.
We're doing pretty good so far. Yeah. We relocated recently from Florida to Colorado.
Yeah,
And
it's Florida where I
and
am now, by the way.
yeah, you're just following me. See, so I started in Illinois and then I moved to Florida and now I'm in Colorado. So just give it a few more years and maybe you'll join us out here. The mountain view is beautiful. We
Yes. We were actually in Colorado about six to 8 weeks ago. We were there when it had the first snow for the season.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was Monday, I think.
We just had quite a wintry storm blow through that dumped a lot of snow and it was
I
great. I
don't
love
need to know specifically, but what part of Colorado?
We are northeast of Denver in
Northeast.
a little it's Brighton, Colorado. It's still a bit of a farm town. So I grew up in, I'll tell you the backstory. I grew up in central Illinois. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're talking south of Decatur.
I was just
Uh,
going to say not Decatur, I hope, but yeah, there it is.
Close enough. Yep.
Yeah.
I worked in talk radio in Decatur, WSOY, News Talk 1340
Yeah. Soy.
WSOY.
Oh my
Oh yeah.
God.
Yep. And a very, very small town, rural Midwest Illinois, 1,400 people, high school graduating class of 32. And
That's on the
so
side.
farm town is it's comfortably uncomfortable for me, right? Because it's where I grew up, but also as a trans person, it's kind of a weird place to be. So this place is a
Yeah.
little bit bigger than that, but it's also not like downtown big city, which is not my forte at all.
Yeah. Now, did you get snow in this recent round? I heard there was snow in Colorado.
We did, yeah. We got a few inches, enough to make a snowman, and that's unusual because the snow out here is usually so dry
Yeah.
that it would stick to make snowmen. So I got to take my daughter out and make a snowman.
Well, I was fascinated on our recent trip through Colorado. We went through a place, I think it's Wolf Creek Pass,
Okay.
and they get 400 inches of snow a year. And 30 miles north of there gets 40 inches of snow. So at Denver on the extreme west side, I know everyone who lives in Denver or who's ever been there knows this. I'm just new. You can get a storm that drops feet of snow. And in Denver, you have 1 foot. And then, like where
Mhm.
you are, all the moisture has been wrung out. You get the leftovers, the dry, fluffy snow.
Mhm.
Um, and you get a few inches, and it maybe even then melts, surprisingly, because you're still at a reasonable elevation. You're just not 14,000 feet.
Yep. And often not even that. Often it will like I-25 that runs north south through
Yeah.
Denver is kind of the dividing line. If you're east of I-25, you may get snow, but probably not.
Yeah. It's pretty trippy to think that because everyone, I think, would think Colorado is very high snow
Hmm.
kind of
Hmm.
place. But it's like we were in Hawaii once many years ago. And depending on exactly where you were in Hawaii, you could be in a rainforest or a desert. So
Yeah.
absolutely fascinating. Tell us about what's going on with you and the Humanist Society.
Sure. So I am the president of the Humanist Society, and this is an organization that folks may not be as familiar with. There are lots of organizations around with humanist in the title, but the Humanist Society is an 85-year-old institution, nonprofit. We started off as a Quaker movement, and that developed into the humanist movement. And so we are one of the oldest organizations in the United States, humanist organizations, and our organization has a religious distinction, and this can be a point of contention, but
Ah,
among some
yes,
folks
yes,
in our movement, which I'm of course happy to talk about. But the courts in the United States have long held that humanism, for all intents and purposes, is a religion,
right.
and so our organization endorses the quote unquote clergy of humanism, and we're talking about celebrants and chaplains, lay leaders and invocators. Those are the four big categories of folks that we endorse, and they all do something very, very different. But it's really sort of training and credentialing the leaders for the humanist community.
Do you guys do it? The thing some churches do, a calling where the person is called to the work, or they're just employees?
Not quite. So, so we are an endorsing body essentially, and so think of like for the chaplains specifically. Chaplains of any background work in hospitals and prisons and certain military institutions in roles that are emotional spiritual care, right? And so uh, typically those come from a faith tradition,
Right.
and so thinking about if you're in the hospital or if you're in prison and you're looking for someone to provide some emotional care, having someone who comes in with your belief system as core to who they are makes a big difference. And yes, all chaplains are trained to, we serve everyone, right? All chaplains are trained to serve all, but it's really special when you can connect with somebody who comes from the tradition, the beliefs system that you personally have. And so that's, one of the reasons why it's important to get humanist professionals in more places.
And
The
hopefully they're trained better than some of the chaplains I've experienced in medical situations, hospital situations. We once had a family member that was on life support, basically waiting for everyone else to show up, to turn off the machine, unplug the machine. And there's about 20 of us sitting in a waiting room. And I think he was Catholic, but I'm not sure. The chaplain comes in and says, "Wow, there's a lot of you here. Who are you guys here to see?" And someone says the person's name, and then he says, "Well, how's he doing?"
Oh goodness.
and
Wow.
and then it got weird because after that, he tried to talk like a human being to us for a couple of minutes, and then he gave up. And then he went to the trash can and pulled out all of the aluminum cans so that they could get recycled.
Oh my.
And I don't know if he needed the money that bad
Yeah.
or what, but we were just looking at each other like, dude, what the fuck? So excellent. You've got this program where you do training and education and, well, not licensing, is it?
Right. So a lot of specifically, we stick with chaplains here, often go on to seek board certification.
Okay.
So then there are industry credentialing bodies that handle that piece of it. But having the endorsement from the religious organization going into that process is often required, but certainly helpful.
Right.
Chaplains are also required to have a master's of divinity. So this is the thing, there's a lot of like religious holdover in this, right? Chaplaincy started off as a religious, like the priest is going to come pray with you because your grandpa is having his last moments. We're going to do last rites. And that's what people think of when you say chaplain generally.
Yeah.
But then it evolved into its own sort of industry, which is specifically about spiritual care and emotional care. And so um, the industry language, all of those things that are tied up in it are still very religious traditionally religious in its
Right.
language. So that's kind of strange too.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, do you guys do any kind of conference or online meetings, seminars, webinars? What's your
We provide our endorsees have access to a repository of professional development offerings, and those are classes and documents that have been written. Switching out of the chaplaincy, our celebrants are kind of the other big thing that people know about, and our celebrants are the only humanist distinction that grants you the legal authority to solemnize weddings. So that's an entirely different thing that our people do, but they have so our we offer professional development on how to create your wedding business, how to and not just weddings,
yeah.
memorials, life cycle ceremonies. So how do you write those ceremonies and some of the business aspects of it. Those are the professional development offerings that we do put together. And then from time to time, we will do trainings like a celebrant training, which is an all-day course for people who are interested or who already are celebrants to come in and learn some of that stuff face to face in a classroom sort of setting. We had one of those here in Denver, actually, with the American Humanist Association's conference that was here in Denver last year before last.
Okay.
Whatever, the time has no meaning.
Yeah. Ever since COVID, it's all.
Exactly.
Someone asked me when did that happen, and I go 4 years ago. Oh wait, plus two, so six. Because you always got to add 2 more years because
2 years for COVID. Yeah.
2 years for COVID. And you are actually my first interview post Trump 2
Ugh.
or Trump 47. Um,
Um,
Anything you want to share? I don't even know what the fuck to ask at this point. I'm so outside of my brain.
it's really frustrating. And I take my humanist society hat off and
Yes.
share the commiseration and frustration and uh, existential dread that a lot of people are feeling right now. I'm right there with you. Again, I'm a trans person living in America in 2024. And for me, the political, the political,
Environment.
yeah, I suppose
Yeah.
the political environment, it's you. I've been asked to figure out how to get my abuser to stop abusing me.
Yeah.
That's sort of how I've felt. And the answer to that question is you don't. You pack your shit in the middle of the night and get the fuck out of there. And so I'm really feeling some type of way about like, oh my gosh, where do we go from here? How do we process all of this? And what, do I need to be laying some foundations for things that I might need to do one of these days? It's really scary.
Well, I had put up on Facebook just for laughs, half joking, mostly joking, a world map and ask people, where would you go? And
Hmm.
holy shit, it got hundreds of comments. Um, and I think mine would be Italy. Have you picked your country yet, or you're going to go to if you could?
I'm thinking between like Norway, Sweden, Denmark, maybe New Zealand, something like that. That's kind of where my mind is.
Yeah, the thing that would worry me about all of those, and one of the reasons I moved from Chicago to Florida and probably would never move to the Denver area, um, is the dark winters
Yes.
because you get really far from the equator. And
Hmm.
we visited Scotland and Ireland and Iceland. Oh, what amazing places! That really cool summers, reasonably warm winters, maybe a little too rainy and foggy from time to time. But when you get to December
Yeah.
and just like 1 or 2 or 4 hours of sun, no, I couldn't handle 6 hours of sun or 8 hours of sun when I was in Chicago. I'm not going to handle 2 or 3 hours of sun.
I think something that I learned having lived in Illinois and then in Florida, and this is, I mean, we left for very political reasons,
Yeah.
uh, but I don't miss Florida at all. Not politically, not environmentally. Like it's so damn hot down there. We didn't know our neighbors, right? We moved up here, and I can name 4 or 5 people right around us that
Yeah.
we met and talk to and hang out with sometimes, and we didn't have that in Florida at all because it's just so freaking hot that nobody goes outside.
Well, I must be really lucky because the neighborhood I'm in, unfortunately, the town is very conservative. MAGA. That's very MAGA. I can handle conservative. But
There's a difference
but
for
my
sure.
actual street is wickedly diversified. Matter of fact, uh, next door to me is a couple of ladies that are married, and then I have African American, Puerto Rican neighbors. Just the diversity is beautiful, and I talk to all of them. And yeah, in the summer we're not outside much, but uh, we do have a pool, and neighbors have pools. So sometimes we're like, "Hi, neighbor," over the fence, uh, and I text them when I'm not going to be around so they can look at the house or pick up the mail. So that was really a surprise for me, given the town that I'm in. But my specific street is delightful. So I'm sorry you didn't have that wonderful of an experience because I have lived in really upper end neighborhoods, and I've also lived and I quite liked living in a very blue collar neighborhood, in part because you could have a neighbor that would paint a room or replace your water heater for
Yeah.
a case of beer, kind of thing. Uh,
Hmm.
that's awesome. And it is always, not always, often the case that the people that really have nothing to give are the most giving.
Mm,
And so, I don't know,
yeah. I
broad
didn't
strokes
have
I'm
I
thinking here.
I I didn't have that kind of community where we lived in like the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But in the area, uh, we did. We were in a very red county, Polk County in Florida,
Yeah.
and church on every street corner kind of place. And so we had been coming up to the Central Florida Free Thought communities events, and that was like an hour drive, and we had little kids, so that was like it was difficult to
Yeah.
make happen. And my wife looked at me one day and said, "When are you going to stop bitching about it and just do it?" And so we did, and we created the atheist community of Polk County, and that became our family. Like that, very quickly, people came to that. They were craving it. They needed community,
Yeah.
and we did so many great things. And if I miss anything about Florida, it's the humanism, the stuff that we did that helped people. That's what I miss the most.
Well, in Orlando, the pride organizations are ginormous,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
they are getting people elected. They have actual money. They have fundraisers where they raise monies that secular organizations can only dream of. And this is just a local organization. But I think part of that motivation is that they are literally fighting for their lives here in Florida. And
Yeah.
things have happened and things probably will happen. And they know that they've got to do everything they can to make a change. I don't want to spend too much time on Florida versus Colorado, but it's good. It's good to talk about. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
the chaplains know. Oh, yeah, not the chaplains. The people that would do a wedding,
Yes. Celebrants.
celebrants.
Yes.
Thank you. They're not secular celebrants. They're humanist celebrants,
We're humanist celebrants. Right.
and so that could be a wedding, a funeral, um, baby naming, all kinds of other events that people might use a conventional chaplain or a priest or a minister for. So, how do people find out about that if they're thinking, hey, I'm going to get married soon, or I want to have this information in my pocket in case a relative passes away? How do they reach out to you guys?
So you can go to thehumanistsociety.org, and we have a directory that is live where you can search in your state to see if there is a celebrant local to you. There are some, we will tell you that for reasons do not list their information publicly. And so if you're not finding somebody in that directory, hit the contact button, reach out to us. There are others that we can look up for you and help connect you with. But the great thing is because we don't come from such a concrete faith tradition like Christianity, the life cycle ceremony could really be anything that you dream up, right?
Yeah.
We've listed some that are kind of common in Christianity that can port over very easily to a humanist perspective. But think about like as a trans person, I think about all the milestones that I've gone through so far in my transition journey. You change your name, maybe that's a birth certificate and driver's license and social security, and you go through all of that. There's a social transition that happens. Some of us choose to have different surgeries. All of those things give you an opportunity to say, let's pause for a moment and get some friends together and mark this special occasion that this is a momentous time in my life that from here forward is things are going life is going to be different in a way that makes it worth stopping and pausing and putting some priority around. And so anything that you can dream up really is an opportunity to get a humanist celebrant involved to create a ceremony.
Now, I would assume, correct me here if I'm mistaken. I hope I'm not. I have seen religious leaders do really wonderful ceremonies that are about the person that they're there for, especially in a funeral setting. But I've also seen religious individuals that, you know, talk for 40 minutes about how sometimes even the person that's deceased is going to burn in hell. And if you don't repent, you're going to burn in hell. And I've been at one of these where even the Christians in the room were like, what the fuck is going on? I'm assuming that humanist celebrant is going to be way more oriented about the person that they're there to celebrate. Does that sound fair?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, how just
Yeah,
inhuman
yeah,
is it
yeah,
to take a moment like that? I mean, I've had deaths in the family recently, and my father passed away last year, and they were in Florida vacationing in their camper and big 83-foot, fifth
yeah,
wheel. And my sisters and I, Illinois, Texas, and Colorado, all had to fly into Texas or fly into Florida to drive my mom in this big honking camper and truck back home. And we had a lot of conversations about, what we want that service to look like. And some of us wanted it to be a little more religious, and I obviously wanted it to be maybe a little less religious. Um, and that for me really came from the I don't want somebody to come in here and talk about my dad in and not have any idea who he really was,
yeah,
but to
yeah,
come in and put your own religious bullshit on top of who he was as a person.
yeah.
That was my reluctance to doing that, and we were able to, and that's part of the chore, the chore. It's not a chore. That's part of the challenge of being a celebrant is you've got competing ideas in the room a lot of times. A lot of families are split on how they want
Yeah.
that ceremony to go. And so, at the end of the day, you're kind of you've got to do right by the individual that we're talking about. You have to do them the justice.
And it's funny because I've been on record, and sometimes people don't like my choice of words, but
Mhm.
I when I've been in charge of someone's funeral or even involved in someone's funeral, I consider it a sacred obligation.
Hmm.
Now, yes, I'm using a very specifically maybe tainted religious word, but I don't know how else to say it. As an example, when my dad was in his last day or two in the nursing home, he was talking to the minister about what he wanted. And my wife and I were helping the minister find the chapter and verse for the things my dad wanted said. And I even had a few friends who were like, why would you do that? And I said, because that's what he wanted. It doesn't matter if I'm a Christian or an atheist or a Buddhist or a humanist. The person that's about to die is sitting there telling you what they want. You fucking do it. I don't know why that seems hard for people. And the minister who did that did a great job. But I've been at other services, like I mentioned before, where they mention the dead person in the box and then they talk about Jesus for half an hour. And how insulting.
Yeah, or even
Um,
have an altar call.
yeah.
Have you had one of those yet? An altar call at the end
No,
of the
no
funeral?
one in the
Come on.
families that I'm associated with do that kind of Christianity, thank goodness. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, if they're speaking in tongues and people flopping down in the aisles, depending on where you are. But whew, I probably have to get
I
up
think
and leave
I
at that
think
point.
for me the delicate balance is honoring the person who's left with the helping find healing and making meaning for the people who have been left behind.
Yeah,
And so, particularly when you have a diverse room full of people, right? Like we're not all coming from the same faith background for sure. And so there's a lot of like, how can I also give a little bit of comfort and hope to all of these differing perspectives that people are bringing, right? Like if you go into a family member's funeral of mine and start talking about heaven and how he's in a better place and all of this stuff, that does nothing for me
yeah,
in the audience, right? So there's a lot of kind of learning the family too. It's not just the individual who's passed. We want to honor them and do that as authentically as possible, and then also figure out how do we provide the healing and care that those who are left need. And that's
absolutely.
tricky sometimes.
And very, very tricky. Now, we're getting a little long, so I want to be respectful for your time. Are there anything about the organization, about you, that you want to tell us about, where you're going to go speak? Any books coming out? Whatever.
None of that. But if you're a Star Trek fan, I would invite you to hop on over to our podcast. I do a podcast with Ali Ashmead, who is formerly with Go Humanity. If you recall that organization that was doing great work
Yes,
in helping people
that's
who
a
are
heartbreaker right there.
feeding people. I know.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. So she and I used to do a show called Free Thought in Florida with a few other rotating co-hosts that we talked about all of the things happening in Florida before we moved. And then one day she got onto the recording and said, Sarah, I don't know how to tell you this, but I have to leave the show. I'm moving to Colorado. And I went, no shit, I'm moving to Colorado. And so completely unrelated, we both moved out here. She's like 30 minutes south in Aurora. And
Yep.
so now we decided let's do something fun. Let's put something fun and positive out into the world that's not talking about doom and gloom every week. And so we thought we're both Star Trek fans. We're both humanists, and we know Gene Roddenberry was a humanist.
Yes.
So we went back to the original pilot, The Cage, and have been working our way through Star Trek. We just finished the animated series and are about to start the next generation,
Oh,
which is my series. That's my I
TNG,
grew up
man. I'm telling you.
on it. And that's when Gene really had like a little bit more of a lead to really kind of put it in your face and say this is what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Where in the original series, the network had a little more control over him. But that's what he was doing. He was teaching us humanism. The values of Star Trek are humanist values: altruism, compassion, empathy, environmentality, all of that stuff that Star Trek taught us. And
Yeah.
then all these years later, I go, oh, damn, that was just humanism. Oh, okay. So
And
that's what we do. We go back and we look at explore those episodes and the challenging questions, and how as a humanist do we think maybe we should tackle that topic or issue.
kind of unfortunate to think that that was 60 years ago, give or
I know.
take. And we're still aspiring to many of the ideals that were there. I happen to have watched all of TNG in Italian.
Ooh,
And one of the words that stuck out the most to me, because I didn't know it, but then I heard it every few minutes, was tenente.
okay.
And tenente is lieutenant. You don't
Okay.
realize how many fucking times they say lieutenant, because everybody other than the captain is a fucking lieutenant on that show.
Hilarious.
So tenente, and then for when Picard would do, isn't it engage?
Engage. Yes.
Engage. I think they had some trouble with trying to pick a word that would mean that, but not mean something else, because it could mean to be like engage in a battle or a contest, like, I don't know, in Italian. So they ended up going with attivare, which is to activate.
Okay.
And then they definitely decided that data was the name of the android instead of data.
Okay.
And so when there was an episode where people were arguing about whether it's data or data, in Italian, it was whether it was data or data.
Oh gosh.
So, I don't know.
Well, I think that was cleared up in the season 2 episode where Data told Dr. Pulaski, "Sit down, shut up. It's Data, you bitch."
Yeah.
I'm not a Dr. Pulaski fan.
Yeah.
But
so
anyway,
that was a fun cultural experience. And actually, every once in a while on my podcast, I drop in, I'll have to do it this episode. I'll drop in a little soundbite in Italian. It's a lunga vita e prosperità, long life and prosperity.
oh yes,
Live long
I
and
love it.
prosper.
I love it. That's
So,
amazing.
anyway, how can people reach you? What's the website? And if I missed something, please feel free to go on.
Yeah, well, I want to tell you about two other things real briefly.
Yeah.
There are two more endorsements that the Humanist Society does that we didn't really talk about, and they don't get a lot of attention, but I think they should. And one of them is the lay leader endorsement, and that grew out of a military program.
Yeah.
Before chaplaincy in the military, there were lay leaders. We're still struggling to get chaplains, humanist chaplains, recognized by the military. That's something that we are actively working towards. And so then the lay leader endorsement sort of transmogrified into community leader. So if you have a local humanist atheist community out there, maybe think about becoming lay leader endorsed. That's a program that we're really starting to build out now. And so if you get in on it now, you might get, you get to influence how that grows and how it looks, and be able to really tell us what you need from a leadership perspective and that grassroots organizing stuff. And then the last one is the Invocator. And this is one that Central Florida Free Thought community makes great use of, and doing
Yes.
invocations. And in invocations, you kind of have to sell people on the idea of why we need to be there. And
Yeah.
this is true for all of these things, right? Like there's an argument happening right now on Facebook. Why do we have humanist chaplains? That's a religious thing that shouldn't exist, blah, blah, blah. Right. So in most city councils, you're going to hear a Christian prayer before every meeting.
Right.
And
Yeah.
yet they are supposed to lead from the perspective that they have a diverse group of constituents that they have to hear all of. And so by coming in as a humanist and asking to do the invocation and doing a humanist invocation, you're not just, being that visibility and saying, we come here today because we're all here because we have some care and concern and compassion about our community, and we want to make things better, and that's why we do what we do. But also that we come from a very diverse background, and there are people here of all kinds of different beliefs and ethnicities and backgrounds, and it takes all of us to make this thing the positive, wonderful thing that it is. Being in that room also says to those elected officials, you're not just elected to represent the people who look like you, who sound like you, who believe like you.
Right.
There's a lot of us out here, and you have to hear all of us, and you have to lead for all of us. So those are all endorsements that you can get.
Nice.
Processes are very easy. There's an application and interview and that sort of thing. And that's all at thehumanistsociety.org. And if you want to hear the Star Trek podcast, we swear a lot and celebrate 420 and try to make each other laugh. And that's something that America needs right now. That's humanisttrek.com.
Humanisttrek.com.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the Phil Ferguson show and telling us about the Humanist organization. I appreciate you being here very much.
My pleasure, Phil. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.